Good evening and welcome to our midweek service. Great that you could be here. I have a few announcements, and then we'll have prayer and then our song service. Sympathy is expressed to Gerald Bean, Sandy Bean, and Charla Henson in the passing of Dorothy Bean Monday night. The visitation and funeral was earlier today. Please pray for the family as this happened very suddenly. Sympathy is expressed to Barbara Holly in the passing of her friend Jack Thompson. Jack often attended services here before we got sick. Arrangements will be at Collier's. Visitation is Friday, 5 to 8 p.m., and funeral services Saturday at 11 a.m. Sympathy is also expressed to Kendall Stevenson in the passing of his friend Anna McGregor. Funeral arrangements are incomplete at this time, but will be at Collier's. Kip Phillips, the father of Scott Phillips, is in Lourdes Hospital, room 311, with back pain. Dennis Tucker is asking for prayers on behalf of his parents. His mother, Ava Tucker, had a heart stent put in last week and is currently fighting the flu. His father, Rex Tucker, has congestive heart failure. Bob and Jenna Pogue have been moved to the Steely House, room 108. Please keep them in your prayers for their adjustment. Billy Lyles was scheduled to have shoulder surgery today, but that has been postponed and scheduled for a later date because Billy has the flu. Eileen Christ has been moved to the Spring Creek Health Care, and she is in room 216. Barbara Holly is in need of prayers as she has dealt with many sicknesses since the first of the year. Cards and calls are appreciated. Val Newton, a friend of Danny Ham, is in the Murray Hospital. He is very sick and has requested prayers. Tomorrow night, Apologetics Press will be presenting a special movie, Is Genesis History, shown at the Cinemark Theater in Paducah. A bus will be leaving the church building at 6:20. If anyone is interested in going, please see Mark. The Western Kentucky Leadership Workshop at the Bryansburg Church of Christ is coming. The theme this year is Rebuilding the Walls, Lectureship Principles from the Book of Nehemiah. That's March the 18th. There is a flyer on the foyer bulletin board with more information. Because we have a large number of people attending the CYC this weekend, we will not have Bob's lesson on evangelism this Sunday. It will be the following Sunday instead. And I understand we'll also not have our singing this Sunday night, group singing as well. Are there any other announcements? Let's go to our Father in prayer. Father, we indeed thank you for this day. It's been so beautiful. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for the opportunity we have in coming and learning more of your will tonight. We are mindful of those who have lost loved ones, especially the Bean family this week in the funeral today. And we pray that you will comfort that family. Be with Barbara Holly and her illnesses and also in the loss of her friend, Jack Thompson. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for making all this possible in fellowship tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, we'll sing all 4 verses. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kin thy-led minds is like to that above. Before our Father's throne, we pour our heart and prayers, our fears, our hopes, our aims, our one, our comforts and our cares. We share our, let's do number 4. When we asunder part, it gives us inward pain, but we shall still be joined in heart and hope to meet again.
So this Wednesday night, I'd like to bring to you a message that I find is needed to be heard. And it's about our environment and our surroundings and why they should matter to us as Christians. I'm going to start off with this old tale called The Frog in the Boiling Pot. And the point of this tale is this frog is put into this pot of water. And it's swimming around and it's enjoying itself, being happy, and swimming and exercising around. Well, a person puts this pot over a fire, and as the water's warming up, the frog doesn't think anything of it. In fact, it just keeps swimming and enjoys itself. Well, as time goes on, eventually it gets hotter and hotter, and the frog becomes faint. And as time continues, the frog is, well, dead. So you're probably thinking, what does this frog have to do with me? Well, our surroundings can affect us, and we not even notice it. This frog didn't care as the water heated up, and it just kept swimming around and enjoying itself. Didn't do anything, could have hopped out of the pot, and it just stayed there. So our environment does affect us, and we never notice it. Most of us have a phone or something to connect us to social media or our friends, our school, our work, all these important things in our lives. And these influence us in very many ways. Like bad ways is, to start off, negative, terrible people that come to church or don't. People that come to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesdays nights, and says, I'm a Christian. But as soon as they walk out of those doors, they will start doing things of the devil and of the world. Or there's those people that don't believe in God at all and completely ignore everything that the Bible teaches and do not believe in his word. And there's 3 big examples of this, and one is Samson. He is this strong, mighty warrior, and he is ready for anything. He could take on anything. But because he didn't care of who he was surrounding himself with, these people took away his power, all his strength, and basically made him worthless. And it destroyed him until the point of death. Then there's Solomon, whose wives and his relationships made his faith waver, and he stopped believing in God for a little bit. Then there's Eve, and she got to walk, talk, and be with God, and actually got to see him and be there in his presence, which is more influenced from the teacher himself. But one moment with the devil alone, and she partook of that fruit, and sin was in this world. So it can affect us very negatively and can turn us away from God. But it can also affect us positively. Like, we're going to CYC this weekend, and we're going to be around Christians that help us grow and can help teach us, and so we can be better Christians and teach future generations. And we'll be better off, and we'll be around our own people that will support us and push us towards Christ. But not only should we be around these people, we should also be one of them. 1 Timothy 4, verse 12 says, "Let no one look down on you, your youthfulness, but rather in your speech conduct love, faith, purity, and show yourself as an example to those who believe." So not only should we be around these people, but we should also be one of these people and help our family and our friends influence people at school and work positively and help them throughout their Christian walk. So if you realize that you're around the wrong kind of people and you need help from your church family and your friends, then please come forward as we stand and as we sing.
Christ will meet you there. He intercedes for you. Lift up your voice, leave him in your care, and begin life anew. Kneel at the cross. Leave every care. Kneel at the cross. Jesus will meet you there. Kneel at the cross. There is room for all who would his glory share. Bliss there awaits, harm can ne'er befall those who are anchored there. Kneel at the cross. Leave every care. Kneel at the cross. Jesus will meet you there. Kneel at the cross. Give your idols up. Look unto realms above. Turn not again to thy sparkling cup. Trust always in his love. Kneel at the cross. Leave every care. Kneel at the cross. Jesus will meet you there. We're dismissed to class.
It's the one that says preacher. All right, so we're good. We're going to work through our book of Proverbs. We're still going. We're in lesson 9. If you recall, was that last week? I think it was last week. We met the fellow named Augur in chapter 30. And we saw where his favorite number is the number 4. And we saw all the humor that he has. Now we'll get back a little bit serious again. We've had our comedic break, and we're going to talk about the second most important subject in the book of Proverbs, maybe the third. Number 1 is wisdom and foolishness. Number 2 is women, the person you find yourself to be around. And number 3 is this, money, wealth, and power. And it's going to be fascinating as you run through here. Pick out about 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever verses, memorize them because they will serve you well as we go through. Why do people have trouble nowadays with money? There's not enough of it, right? Okay. Why else? Okay. Stewardship, all right? You need to use what you have wisely, okay? What else? Live beyond your means. A lot of times, instead of buying stuff we actually need and not buying stuff we don't need, we tend to buy stuff to impress other people, right? And that's when we really get in trouble. Let's go ahead. We'll look through here. I think we got about 15 slides, but I think we'll be able to finish as we go through. Look in chapter 11, verse 4. Yeah, you're able to see that all right. Chapter 11, verse 4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Now, this is especially true in the Jewish economy. You go back to the days of Elijah, of Jeremiah, of Isaiah during that time. Those were right after the apex of Solomon, but Israel was very, very wealthy because they were right on the trade route between Egypt and Persia. They were right on that trade route where they could make quite a bit of money. But even though they had wealth, did that wealth protect them, buy them protection? It just caused them trouble, didn't it? All right, looking in today, it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, does it, when you're thinking about the day of death. They may be able to prolong it, your life a little bit longer, but rich and poor, they both die alike. We keep looking through verse 16. A gracious woman retains honor. Ruthless men retain riches. He who trusted riches will fall, but the righteous man will flourish like foliage. Foliage? Foliage. How do you say that here? Foliage? Foliage. All right. Yeah. It's going to flourish like the leaves on a bush. Thank you, Gerald. That's a much easier way to say that. I like it. All right. So if you trust in your money, it's going to fall apart. But if you trust in God, then you will bloom like a bush. Chapter 19, verse 4. Think of the prodigal son. Wealth makes many, many friends, but the poor is separated from his friend. All right, so that's something to see right there. Be careful when you're looking around at your friends to see why they're your friends. Sometimes your friends are not true friends. They're just with you because of what they can get from you. Skip down to chapter 22. A good name is to be chosen above great riches, loving favor rather than silver or gold. This is an important one as well. And I like verse 2. The rich and the poor, they're going to have this in common. The Lord is Lord of them all. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. You still stand before God, and you still have to use what you have in front of God in the proper way. 23 verse 4. Do not overwork to be rich because of your own understanding. Cease. What was it? It was a French philosopher and came to America, but I think it was true in France as well. He said what people will do is they spend their entire life, they waste their health in order to gain money. And so they'll spend their entire life wasting their health, staying up late, overworking, and everything else to get a hold of riches. And then when they get old and they get sick, what happens to all that money? They spend it all to try to regain some measure of their health. So they spend all their money to regain their health, or no, they spend all their health in order to get wealth, and then they spend all their wealth to get health. And so it's kind of silly the way that works. And verse 4 works that way. Look at verse 5. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings, and they fly away towards heaven like an eagle. Oh, man. You ever have money that flies away? Mine sometimes will have the, where the superheroes will have a cloaking device and just disappear. Back at this time, he said, my money has wings like an eagle. And sometimes, boy, it feels like that. Verse 6, do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies. Okay? Verse 7, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. That morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up and waste your pleasant words. Okay, 6, 7, and 8 work together. What's he teaching us there? Be very careful if you're around somebody cheap and they offer you something that has a lot of money in it. And why does he say be so careful about that? It's going to make you sick, all right? How's it going to make you sick?
Eat too much of it.
Okay, you can eat too much of it. What's he after right here? Be careful who you accept a favor from, because what's going to happen? They're going to expect what? They're going to expect 2 favors in return, and you're going to be really sorry that you ever did that, right? I knew an older lady in a congregation one time. She would always have the teenagers over to eat. But right after they ate, she would say something like, let's rake the yard, or let's, clean up trash here or there or wherever. And it's one of those things where, in a sense, people should be willing to help her anyway do those things. But oftentimes what she was doing is entrapment. And you come here, take this. Now that you're in my house, let's do all these things. And that's what the writer of Proverbs is saying here. Be very careful who you accept help from. Now, in the church, it shouldn't be that way, should it? We should be kind and helpful all towards each other. Now let's look at dishonest wealth. 13 verse 7. There's someone who makes himself rich, and yet even though he's rich, he has nothing. There's one who makes himself poor, and yet he has great riches. All right, what's that one telling us? How can you be rich and yet be poor? And how can you be poor and yet be rich? Happiness. Okay. There's a lot of poor people really have a lot better time with life than a humongously wealthy person would be. All right. Looking through history, looking through even the fables, who is a rich man who ended up being pretty sad? We talk about one at Christmas every year. Scrooge, right? Ebenezer Scrooge. Yeah, he's one. Who else? Now, don't point towards anybody, but who else? Huh? King Midas. Everything he would touch would turn to gold, right? Everything he would touch would turn to gold. He was a king always wanting more, and so he received that as a gift from the gods, that everything he would touch would turn to gold. And he thought that was the greatest thing ever until his granddaughter ran up and he hugged her, and she turned to gold.
Starved to death.
And he starved to death as well. That's right. That's right. Okay. That's another way of teaching through that fable there. All right. Now, so you can be rich and have nothing. You can be poor and yet have great riches. So that's a good lesson for us to remember. It's a good lesson. Your happiness is not tied to money. Your happiness is tied to the experiences you have in life and ultimately in the way in which you please God.
Which of those things do most people aspire to have?
The riches or the happiness? What do y'all think? Are people chasing riches or are they chasing happiness?
They think the riches are going to make them happy.
Yeah.
Where you're at, too.
Yeah, they think the riches are going to make them happy.
I'll tell you what a rich man told me once.
Yeah?
I used to drink coffee at a place, and he always come and sit with us. He was a very, very wealthy man. And we was talking about, what you could do with money and how much it would make your life better and all that. And he said, I can tell you this. He said, money will not buy you happiness. But he said, it does let you enjoy being miserable.
Okay. Did y'all hear what he said? He used to drink coffee with a pretty wealthy guy. And they were talking over coffee one day. And what the wealthy man said was, always remember this. Money does not buy happiness.
Just lets you enjoy.
It just
being
lets you enjoy being miserable. Money does not buy you happiness, but it does allow you to enjoy being miserable. So that's a neat way of saying. I've never heard that before. I like that. I like that.
The rich man can be happy according to where his heart is.
The rich man can be happy, depending where his heart is.
Be happy
Yeah.
according to where his heart is.
You run over in the John letters, you see a fellow named Gaius who is humongously wealthy. The church is meeting in his house. He is supporting preachers left and right as they travel through. He's a wealthy man, and he appears to be happy, and things are going well for him. See a guy named Barnabas who is selling property in order to give it to the church. Barnabas is an encourager. He's obviously a very godly and a happy man. He's using his wealth in a correct way. Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Seems like Mary and Martha seem to be in charge of that situation at that house oftentimes. They were wealthy. Whenever Jesus came through, he and his apostles would stop there and stay for a while. Now, back at that time, if you could feed all 12 apostles and Jesus and any other disciples there, you're obviously fairly wealthy. So sometimes we think in the church, man, if you're rich, you've got to be a sinner. That's not what the Bible teaches, but the Bible does teach that your heart has to be right with God and that you have to give the stewardship of your resources over to God and not trust in riches. Okay, any other comment? Say it again.
What's your definition of a rich man?
The definition of a rich man, anybody richer than me. Okay. What is the definition of the rich man? This is important because you get over to Matthew 19, right? And Jesus, as he's looking at that rich young ruler, and the rich young ruler goes away sorrowful, he turns around to everybody and he says, it is harder for a rich man to get into heaven than it is for what? A camel to go through the eye of a needle. Now, some people will go back to what a monk said in the 5th century, and this, you'll even find this in some commentaries, that in Jerusalem there was a little gate, a little door, and the Jews really enjoyed making that camel get on his knees, and they would push him to go through that door. That is from the 5th century story. It's not actually what Jesus is talking about. What Jesus is saying is a person who trusts in his riches more than he trusts in God is not going to get where he needs to be. But I think we're not doing violence to the scripture by saying a person who trusts in a relationship that he has with somebody more than he does with God, he's not getting into heaven. A person who trusts in himself more than he trusts in God is not getting into heaven. So the question is, going back to our original, what is the definition of a rich man? Are you allowed to have $100 in the bank, $1,000 in the bank, $1 million in the bank? Where do we get to say it? People who are in Benin would have a different idea of what it is to be wealthy than people in Benton. People in Benton may have a different idea of what it means to be wealthy than somebody who's in LA or New York, right? So what is the definition of a rich man?
Does riches necessarily mean monetarily?
It probably does in Matthew 19 with what we're talking about, but not always. You know, sometimes people will trust in other things besides God.
Well, I think about the people throughout the world.
Right, yeah. Well, sure. You know, you go down to the Caribbean islands, those people, the average income per year is $14,000 a year for a family of 4. Not a lot of money, but they spend a lot of time in hammocks and they spend a lot of time on the beach. It's not the worst life in the world, you know? All right? So, you know, what is the definition of being rich?
Well, if it's simply more than you need, just about everybody's rich anyway.
Yeah, if it can't be more than you need, because everybody would be rich then, because we have more than we need. That's right. The way I define it, and you know, I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if I'm right at all. The way I define it is the point where you feel self-sufficient. The point where you become Belteshazzar or Nebuchadnezzar, and you stand on the wall looking around Babylon, and you say, look at what I've done. Look at how great and mighty I am. The point in which you become the rich young ruler and you see the commands of Jesus and you refuse to follow them because you love your stuff too much. The point where you end up deciding that you can make it on your own because you have enough money to take care of yourself, enough money in the bank. Sir? Yeah. Right. Right. It was told to him, you go sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. Now, what's awesome about that passage, or interesting to me, and it may just be because I'm nerdy or just the way I read it, Jesus never said that to Matthew. Matthew 9:9, Jesus didn't say, Matthew, you need to sell everything you own, go sell it, and then come follow me. Jesus just looked at Matthew and said, you come follow me. When he saw Peter and John in chapter 1 of John, he said, you follow me. It was this rich young ruler that he saw that he told he needed to go sell everything. Yes, sir, Gerald?
Don't you think, though, he knew that rich young ruler thought more of his possessions
Yeah.
than anything else that he
Yeah.
could tell him?
He knew him so well that he knew that was a problem with him.
Yeah.
Because he said, you need to follow the commands. He said, I've done all these things since my youth. Jesus looked at him, loved him, examined him, and knew exactly what he needed to do. He had a love affair with his stuff.
More than he needed, and he decided to keep it.
Right. He decided it was worth more than God was.
He's able to discern the intent of his heart.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, yes, sir.
Also, at that time, it said that Jesus loved him.
Right.
So he was an admirable young man. But Matthew and the other apostles had families,
Right.
and their challenge was different than this young man. In that time, if somebody was going to follow Jesus, they followed him as a rabbi.
Right.
And they couldn't have all kind of businesses here, there, and yonder and follow him and learn of him. And of course, Matthew and them gave up a lot to be with Jesus. But at the same time, this young man was a prime student. He would have been excellent because he was young, he was godly. Christ loved his attitude about what should I do.
Right.
But then he found out that his heart was in his money. But he was willing to let him follow him and become a disciple.
That's right.
But he just didn't have it in him. And we all have the same calling.
That's right.
To be Jesus' disciple.
This rich young ruler scares me. He is a scary dude. You got some scary dudes in the Bible, right? He scares me because this rich young ruler was obedient to God. He kept all the 10 commandments. This rich young ruler appeared to all of his neighbors to be a very righteous and holy person. The only problem he had was his heart loved stuff more than it loved God. You and I, we can be in a situation today where we look on the outside to be very spiritual and holy. I mean, we look good maybe, and everybody who knows us thinks we're good. But it's God who looks upon the heart, and that's where we get in trouble. That is where we get in trouble. So we got to be real careful about that. All right, verse 11. Man, I do chase rabbits. Acts 8:4, go everywhere preaching. A rich man, in my view, is somebody who loves stuff more than he loves God. Or maybe to say he relies on things more than he relies on God. He does not live by faith.
I think we've all around here got more stuff than we need.
Oh, yeah, and you can have more stuff than you need. Yeah, of course we have more stuff than we need. But do you trust in your stuff or do you trust in God? Is God just a convenient part of your life or is he the full pursuit of your life? Yeah, Trish?
One part says, God gives you a job to work.
Mm-hmm.
You can share.
Yes. Let him who used to steal no longer so that he can give to those who need.
So you have that, and you can help more than others.
Right.
Probably that might be.
Right. Yeah. You run over to Romans 12, and also another passage is in Romans. It talks about the different graces given to people, and there's a grace of giving, right? Remember that grace of giving? God creates his children, some of his children, with a wonderful attribute of making money. And the reason that he gives them that gift is to support the church and to support the mission work of the church. And so there is a gift that God has given people, not a miraculous gift like you'll read of in other places, but God does bless people in the church with wealth, and he expects them to use it.
Still trusting God to be rich.
I think you can still trust in God and be rich. And
Or go and be rich. It's somebody who doesn't
Yes. The problem, rich defined by Scripture, I think, is to trust in your stuff more than you can trust in God. And to think that you rely upon yourself rather than, and not put Him first. Maybe that's the best way to go about that.
Where your heart is.
Yeah. Yeah. Wherever your heart is. Yes, sir.
You listen to what I consider Christian wealthy men or women talk about it. They don't talk about their things. They talk about blessings from God, and they talk about what you said, being a steward of it, passing down to their family, or helping people in need. But their mindset seems to be,
Okay.
like you said,
It's a
they're
different
blessing-
mindset.
they're blessing, they've been blessed by God. It's not that I'm a self-made man. Look what I've done, that I've done it. They've been blessed by God to be this way and to have these things, and they pass it along to,
Right.
to help people.
Yeah. That's very true. In the passage which Doug just referenced, you know, he's going back to Matthew 6:24 through 33. Huh?
Is it similar to like, it's not what money you have, it's what you do with it?
Yeah, it's what you do with your money and how you want to use your money and how you're a steward of God's money. I think so. Does that work for you, Jerry? All right, we'll come back. We'll come back. I'm a buzzard. I'll come back to that dead stuff.
15:6 kind of tells that you might not recognize that treasure. It might not be real obvious, and you might not recognize that trouble in people.
Yeah, 15:6. In the house of the righteous there is much treasure, but the revenue of the wicked is trouble. Okay.
And that's not always easy to recognize. We see some people that we think they're rich and happy, but
Right.
they've got troubles that we don't know about.
Man, yeah.
But you know, Mark, it does always boil down, I think, in answer to Jerry's question, the matter of the heart. Because sometimes people can be very poor people and finally acquire just a little bit. And all of a sudden, that's the focal point of their life. So they don't have to have vast amounts in order for your heart to be right.
Yes. That's right. I think I deleted it out of the verses, which we'll cover later. But if you remember what we covered last week, the prayer that Agur has into God in Proverbs 30, Lord, don't let me be so rich that I rely on myself. Lord, don't let me be so poor that I have to steal from somebody. But keep me right at the level where I trust you. And that's the prayer that he has there. So sometimes we wish God would have a little more faith in us, maybe. All right. Okay, wealth gained by dishonesty is diminished. He who gathers by labor will increase. In other words, if you get money, get it in an honest way. 15:6, house of the righteous, there is much treasure. In the revenue of the wicked, there is much trouble. A lot of folks here, growing up, you remember growing up in the old days, back before you really had a lot of shoes, back before you had a lot of the stuff which kids have nowadays. I was sitting with Tom. I don't know if Tom's in here. Tom and I were sitting there last Sunday. We get here maybe an hour early in church. That's how boring we are at home. We have to come down here. But we get here about an hour early in church, and we were sitting there looking at our little smartphones. And I don't even know where it is. There it is. And I just had to buy a new one of these the other day. And as I bought it, I actually read the stinking thing before I signed it. Don't read it. Okay? It makes you bummed out. Don't read the thing. This thing right here, which just about every kid in church has, it runs anywhere between $400 and $700. You don't feel it because you only pay a little bit each month, right? But if you were to come to somebody 15 years ago and say, listen, every child 15 years old, 12 years old, and up is going to be walking around with a $600 phone that works like a computer, what would you think about that prediction? There is no way that's happening, right? You know, and then we look back, you know, a while back and we see, you know, man, we came from a different time and a different place. And it's funny where people spend money now and it seems very usual.
Yeah, I was in India, one of the poorest country. We still have those phones, and even Africa too.
Absolutely. They got them in Africa and India.
So it's very
Yeah. Worldwide. Right. Yeah. Well before cell phones became the thing here. 15, 20 years, they've been all over Europe and other places in the country.
I really think people have to go into those places and experience
Right.
before they understand all this concept.
Yes.
You know, just living among the people here, we don't seem to understand it unless
We don't.
been with people
Right.
who have nothing.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
I grew up at Olive, and when I was a kid, I remember going down the branch behind the house and bringing up wood to put under the iron kettle to heat the water.
Yeah.
That we drew up out of the well by hand for mother to wash clothes in, and she'd wring the clothes out by hand. That's pretty far back, you know.
Yeah. You didn't have a cell phone?
That made my head hurt.
Okay. You didn't have a cell phone either growing up? No? All right. 16, verse 8. Better is a little with righteousness than vast revenues without justice. It is better to have just a little bit if your life is not as stressed. If you are right with God, it's better than vast revenues without justice. Going on, talking about dishonest wealth a little bit more. Chapter 20, verse 21. Inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. All right, what's that mean? Lottery winners, right? What happens to the vast majority of lottery winners? They got a lot of friends for real quick, right? I had never seen this happen before. Never seen this happen before. But one time when I was going to see one of my nephews graduate from Oklahoma Christian, I was driving across Missouri into Oklahoma. And about to cross into the Oklahoma border, I stopped to get gas. And the guy in front of me bought a lottery ticket. He won $200,000. And he turned around and he said, you get $20,000 and you get $20,000 and you get $20,000. I thought to myself, I don't want any part of that business. And I thought to myself, he's not going to have that money much longer. You know, if he's already giving it away now, it's not going to work out the way it should. But man, he was happy. That's the first time I'd ever seen someone actually win. But think about that. You win $200,000 in the lottery, how many other people have not won? If that ticket is $100, or that ticket is $1.
Most of them haven't spent in less than 2 years.
Absolutely, yeah. On average, it goes in 2 years. That's right. Think in the NFL, an NFL player declares bankruptcy on average 5 years after they retire.
There's a lot that makes bankruptcy.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely. Inheritance gained hastily at the beginning does not bless you in the end. Slow and steady wins the race. 21, verse 6. Getting treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting fantasy by those who seek. You're going to get caught. 21:20. There is desirable treasure, the oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a man who is foolish is going to squander it. 28:22. A man with an evil eye hastens after riches and does not consider that the poverty will come upon him. All right, there's a danger in the love of money. He who is greedy for gain troubles his own house. He who hates bribes will live. A present is a precious stone in the eyes of its possessor. Wherever he turns, he prospers. A wicked man accepts a bribe behind the back to pervert the ways of justice. Be careful of those people. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. What's he saying there in 16:18? Maybe a little bit off of our subject. You ever meet the folks? And maybe you are the folks. I know sometimes, usually they're older folks. Sometimes you'll go visit somebody, and every time you walk into their house, they have a gift for you. And it may just be a jar of jelly or a jar of tomato sauce, but they're always wanting to give a gift. And oftentimes people like that, you kind of want to go to their house pretty often, don't you? And that's what he's talking about there. You have a gift, sometimes people will make room for you. And they'll put you in a good spot. Poor man uses entreaties, but the rich man answers roughly. Kind of tell about how you're getting treated by the way that man thinks he is. 22:16, he who oppresses the poor to increase his riches, and he who gives to the rich will surely eventually come to poverty. There's a lot of danger here. 27:20, faithful man abounds with his blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Now, we're running through these, but let's get something straight real quick. Is it wrong to want to make more money? So what is it he's talking about here when he says, he who hastens to be rich? If it's not wrong. Yes, sir.
I think it's too many people want to take shortcuts.
Yep.
And they don't want to let God bless them. They think there's a trick, you know.
Okay. So those who want to take shortcuts don't really trust in God, but they're just scheming, cheating the system.
I think to me that's what it is.
Okay.
So what you do with your money, if you're getting money just to make money and not helping other people, that's sad.
Right.
If you get money to help other people and do good for other things, then you're a blessing to other people.
Very true. Very true. And I think that goes back to your definition about being rich earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
A rich man, if he's making his riches to help others and do good for others, then yes, he's a rich man, but he's rich not only in what he's doing, but also rich in the blessings that he's receiving.
That's right. That's right. I think that works out pretty well. 28:8. One who increases his possessions by usury and extortion gathers it for him who will pity the poor. We're about to run into a few of these, a few slides later. Talks about these people who are gaining all this money, but the reason God's allowing them to gain all this money is so somebody else will spend it. Now, you think about that going back to the book of Genesis, starting about chapter 28. You read about a fellow named Joseph. Joseph saw the prayer. God allowed Pharaoh to become wealthy. Remember the 7 years of plenty? He saved up to feed Egypt, to feed the world. And in 7 years of famine, the entire world had to come to Egypt to buy bread, to buy the flour. And so Egypt became hugely rich. Why did God do that? Because in 400 years, what was going to happen? The Jews are going to leave, and God wanted to have a starter fund for them, right? And so God created a starter fund for all the slaves leaving Egypt by that dream that Joseph had. He let the Egyptians hold it for 400 years, but that was the reason why he allowed that wealth to happen there. And so we have to be careful. God's going to use your money. Sometimes it's voluntarily, sometimes it's not so voluntarily. But according to this, God uses your money. 28 verse 11. Okay, this gets us in trouble sometimes. The rich man is wise, how? In his own eyes, to himself. But the poor man has understanding. He searches him out. A ruler who lacks understanding is a great oppressor, but he who hates covetousness will prolong his days. Now let's talk about contentment, if I recall correctly. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure when you have trouble. 18 verse 11, the rich man's wealth is a strong city and like a high wall in his own esteem. In other words, he thinks he can handle anything because he trusts in his riches. 21:17, he who loves pleasure will soon be poor. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. You watch financial dynasties oftentimes in the U.S., at least over the last century, maybe not so much now. You have your first guy who starts out dirt poor, and he scraps and scraps and scraps and becomes hugely wealthy. Now, usually the second one, the son of that man, will end up increasing the empire because he watched his daddy seize the value of money, right? But what usually happens in the third generation? Start spending it, start enjoying it, and what usually happens? It goes down. And so those who love pleasure oftentimes will become poor. 27:20, hell and destruction are never full. There's always room for one more in hell, he says. And also the eyes of a man are never satisfied. You're never satisfied. You always want to see more. We'll have another verse coming up talking about that. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in his ways, even if he's rich. 30 verse 8, remove falsehood and lies far from me, he says. This is Agur once again. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. That's that passage we were looking at a little bit earlier. I love that verse, 8 and 9. Well, what about money? What do godly people do with money? Godly people honor the Lord with their possessions and with the first fruit of their increase. They're willing to give to God. As they do that in verse 10. Their barns are filled with plenty. Their vats are overflow with new wine. Chapter 10, verse 15. A rich man's wealth is his strong city. Destruction of the poor is their poverty. 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. But the wealth of the sinner is stored up for whom? the righteous. You see there where we're talking about what happened in Egypt? The wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous man. But those who are good leave an inheritance to their children's children. 19 verse 6, many entreat the favor of the nobility, and every man is a friend to who? The one who gives gifts. In the very first place where I preached many years ago, this is in Tennessee in the summers, I went to visit a fellow in the hospital. And this is back in the 90s, a little bit different than it is nowadays. His wife went to the hospital with him, and she had a 10-pound bag, yes, they make them, of M&Ms and of Skittles and of peanuts. And what she did was she had several of those things there, and she had several little things of juice set up so that anytime a nurse came in, they could get candy and they could get something to drink. And what her goal was she wanted the nurses to hang out with her husband all day so that whenever the IV messed up, they would fix it whenever something went on one way or the other. I watched that and I thought, man, that's a lot of germs hanging out there. You know, I don't know if they had thought that through or not, but that was her thought. She said, I want the nurses to want to be here. They're going to want to be in this room to take care of my husband. A little bit of what you see there. You know, when you have a gift, sometimes that opens up a door for you where people can see it. Huh?
You just gave me an answer for a problem. We didn't have enough candy.
You need more candy.
Thing went off on the IV.
Yeah.
Went off for 1 hour.
You find some sort of gifts, or you find somebody in the family who's a nurse and they can fix that. But yeah, bribes are good sometimes. That may not come up in this, but bribes may be good in that sense. All right, what do godly people do with money? He who has pity on the poor, look at this. I like the way he puts it. If you have pity on the poor, you're actually giving it to whom? The Lord. Wow. Okay? When you help somebody who's really poor, it's actually like you're giving that money to God. What did we see in Matthew 25? Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. And they said, Lord, we never saw you. And what did Jesus say in response? When you did it to them, you also did it to me. Okay? And the Lord's going to pay you back whatever you've given. 21:13, whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor, you hear this in the book of James, will also cry himself and not be heard. He covets greedily all day long, but the righteous man gives and he does not spare it. 22:9, he who has a generous eye will be blessed because he gives his bread to the poor. 28:27, he who gives to the poor will not lack, but he who hides his eyes will have many, many curses. All right, debt. Let's talk about debt for a little bit. My son, if you co-sign with a friend, if you have surety for your friend, you have shaken your hands and pledged for a stranger. You are now ensnarled by the words of your mouth. You're taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself and plead with your friend. Do not go to sleep. Verse 4, give yourself no sleep nor slumber through your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hands of the hunter and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. All right, what's he saying here? If you ever have the temptation to go into debt, Monty Python, run away, right? That may be an old movie to refer to. Be sure to get away quickly. 11:15, he who is surety for a stranger will suffer, but one who hates being surety is secure. A man devoid of understanding shakes hands in a pledge, becomes surety for his friend. What's this guy think about this idea of surety? Co-signing with somebody. He seems a little bit against it, doesn't he? Okay, do not take the garment of one who is surety for a stranger and hold it as a pledge when it is for a seductress. The rich rules over the poor, and the servant is the borrower, or the borrower is servant of the lender. Who likes to quote that on the radio all the time? Yeah, a guy in Knoxville named Dave Ramsey. He likes that verse. The rich man rules over the poor, and the borrower is a servant of the lender. Do not be one of those who shakes hands in a pledge, one of those who is surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should he take your bed from under you? Okay. Now, we'll go through here as we finish up. I think we're just about out of time. I looked through and I had about 11 more slides, and I thought, man, they're going to go to sleep on me. So I decided to do a chart. That always fixes it. That keeps them awake. Notice what he says through here, the diligent versus the lazy. Those who are diligent become rich. Those who are always working, always looking for a way to do something better, they become wealthy. Those who are lazy are very soon to be poor. All right. Thank you for being here. Sunday, I know I don't have a lot of people in here. Sunday, try to move to the center. Try to move to the front. We're going to be Gideon Sunday, all right? Remember Gideon had 15,000 and the Lord told everybody to go away? Well, we have about 60 to 70 people going to CYC. The Lord's not running them off, but we've got to get together. We're not going to be smoking pots or whatever they did for Gideon, but we're going to be having together. So if you have an opportunity, think about that. Move to the center, move to the front. All right? Thanks for being here. Have a good night.